Man, what an awesome opportunity today to speak to a former inmate turned CEO, to hear about someone's story of how they turned their life around and how they were able to start from zero pretty much and get to a point where they're running a very successful business in the sports performance world. And you're going to hear a lot about resilience. You're going to hear a lot about your mindset and determination. We're going to learn about his stories as a sports performance trainer and somebody who's helped other people get through some serious injuries and rehab. And you're going to hear about their grit and their determination and the life lessons he's learned from them. And so I really hope you guys enjoy this one. This is a great interview with the CEO and co-founder of Move Human Performance Center in Arizona. His name is Chad Dunn, and you guys are going to enjoy this one. Also, make sure that you guys check out his book. It's coming out on October 28th of 2025. So if you're listening to this prior to that, if you're listening to this after that, make sure you guys check out the description because we'll put more information in the description of this podcast regarding that book, so that you guys can go out and purchase that one as well. So make sure to take your notebook out and take some notes of this one. This is the Gametime Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Gametime Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's up, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast. Shane Larson here, host of the show. Almost 9 years into this podcast. Really grateful for everybody who's tuned in since 2017. And if it's your first time listening, this might be your first time ever. Hey, welcome aboard. I always say that to everybody. We welcome any new listeners. Every single week we have new interviews. And so I just want to say welcome aboard. Thanks for tuning into this episode. As you guys heard in the introduction, we've got a special opportunity to learn from the co-founder and CEO of Move Human Performance in Arizona. His name is Chad Dunn, to be exact. And we're going to learn about his story. So I'm really excited to bring him on. Chad, thanks for joining the show, man.
No, I appreciate you having me, Shane. Thank you very much.
Heck yeah, brother.
Interesting. You start this in 2017. That's when I started Move. So again, the time frames line up together.
Oh, I love it, man. That's what the worlds collide in a good way that way. So super cool. Yeah. So Chad, I want to kind of rewind the clock. So we're going to get into what you do at Move for sports performance and the training that you do at Move in Arizona. But I kind of want to get to know you a little bit. So this is my opportunity to check that out. So when I was first introduced to you, I heard about BMX racing and so forth. So talk to us about your BMX experience.
Yeah. So, part of the history, part of the identity that you have as being an athlete or a coach, or even just somebody that's in the life, you have to start with your identity and what was that built on? What was your foundation? So growing up, and I talk about it, BMX, I started at 6 years old. I'm an extreme sport athlete. My dad was a bull rider, bronc rider, country cowboy guy out of Durango, Colorado. So I grew up in Fort Collins. Young sports, I'm not going to play soccer. My dad's going to put me something of thrills and spills. And so I got into the BMX racing, and I did that for about 10 years until I got into high school, started playing traditional sports, football, started wrestling. And then that kind of got me into my career now of doing physical therapy, sports performance training. So, BMX rider for 10 years, had a young identity, was winning, moved to Arizona, national circuits, national sponsored, highly ranked and everything. But, BMX was never really my full thing for me. I know sometimes as athletes, you got to know who you are. And I like sports, and my sister, she's still to this day, she's 54 years old, still racing bikes, So, the whole thing of know who you are now and know who you were then, I guess, I had the time to transform and to change into different variations of myself.
No, I love that, man. So growing up, who was one of your favorite BMXers that you would watch?
Well, going through the sport of BMX and then kind of the full circle as it all turns around, there was a guy, Eddie King, and Eddie King was with Diamondback, Harry, Larry, the whole deal. Used to look at him when they get done. Hey, let me see your gloves. Let me get your jersey, your number plate or something such as, just so you had some type of memorabilia of the pros that you looked up to, the mentors. Richard Fleming was another big guy with Robinson BMX that was out of Colorado. So those are kind of the guys that I looked up to and that I kind of idled as a young kid. Just as we had it, Eddie's the guy that's behind Move, that we opened up Move. So I'll go into the story about him. But, the old guys that you look up to, these young athletes, if there's anybody listening, you look up to these guys, you might be able to help them out one day in life, which is where I was now.
Isn't that cool how that that comes full circle sometimes, right? You never know, like what you can do when you get older. So I'm looking forward to kind of hearing more about that.
Yeah.
Chad, as you're talking about your BMX experience, I do have a question. Like now that you're in the sports performance training type of deal, did you ever go through any injuries as a BMX racer or anything of that nature?
I got very lucky. I always had stitches. I never broke any bones BMX riding. I was always falling down, get scrapes, bumps, bruises, whatnot. And again, it was just a different. I guess you learn how to fall or whatever. Now, my sister, on the other hand, she's broken every bone in her body. Just recently, she broke her collarbone, I think, for the 7th time. So I was very fortunate. I sustained only the things that would heal. I had the stitches and all that stuff. None of the broken bones. That didn't come till later.
What a blessing that is, I guess.
Thankfully.
I mean,
Yes.
that's a crazy, like, yeah, that's just crazy because that's not common I hear a lot of
No,
racers breaking a lot of bones, wrists, arms, clavicles, like you said, like a lot of that stuff happens, just freak accidents.
fortunate.
Yeah, very fortunate. You mentioned, getting into traditional sports such as wrestling and so forth. I guess my question for you there too, Chad, would be when you were in high school, what sports were you competing in? And like, what was your favorite to take part in? Was it mainly wrestling?
Yeah, well, no, my favorite was football. I love football. My dad also, when he got done with the writing and the Cowboy stuff, he went to Colorado State and played football for the Rams, and that was kind of football was in my blood just as being an athlete. And it just Fort Lewis College, the whole deal. So I played Pop Warner at the tail end of my BMX career. I loved Pop Warner. I was playing quarterback. I was playing safety, but again, I was 5'2", 125 pounds. I was small. So when I went into high school and I became a second string person, which I was always a starter. I loved winning. I'm coming from a BMX career, was a top 3 and everything. So I always looked at myself as being an elite athlete. When I got into just because of my stature of everything, that I was not able to compete at that level. So I went home one day and I told my dad I was pretty pissed about it. I'm not the kid that likes to stand on the sideline. I want to be out there making plays and cheering for people, on the field instead of off the field. And so he said, well, why don't you try to wrestle? That's more mano-a-mano. You're in a weight class against somebody your own size. And again, it's the typical thing. I don't want to roll around with the sweaty guy. I don't want to wrestle around with somebody or wear the singlet or whatever. And he's like, but Chad, you can physically beat the shit out of somebody without getting in trouble. I'm like, okay, that sounds like fun. Let's get a little bit of aggression. Again, I like to be tough. BMX racing taught me toughness. My dad's country lifestyle, that taught me toughness. So I started wrestling, and your junior, senior year, I did pretty well. Senior year, I ended up getting a shoulder injury, and then again, I had to go do therapy. And then that's when I kind of found out like a major thing of my self-identity. Like, you know what? I can see myself doing this one day. And again, like I said, that was my senior year in high school. That helped jumpstart me when I went to ASU for my exercise science undergrad. Kinesiology, biomechanics was my major. But that kind of helped jumpstart me. I was one of those kids that went to college knowing what I wanted to do, and that was sports medicine or some type of the sports performance field.
Man, it's interesting how that works, right? Like an experience in your life where you suffered an injury kind of was the shift of what you could potentially see yourself doing in the future. And it's interesting you also say that. I'll piggyback off what you said earlier about, wrestling kind of. I was a similar way. I was competing in football and basketball my whole life. And when I was in high school, I mean, I was a role player. I wasn't the star player on basketball team or anything. I came off the bench. I did okay. I played half the game for the majority of the years I played. I mean, that's what I did, but I wasn't a star player. But it wasn't wrestling, but I went into boxing. We had a local boxing gym here for Golden Gloves in Idaho. And I was 15 when I started boxing. I fell in love with the sport. And the reason I loved it, Chad, was similar to what you're saying. It was like, it was mano-a-mano. Everything was exposed. Your training was exposed in there, or your lack of training would be exposed. But like, you also were able to highlight your training. Like, it was actually really cool. So whatever the work it was that you put in was always highlighted with just you and the other person. And I always say, like, I gained a lot of confidence boxing, and it translated into basketball too. I still competed in basketball and football and whatnot, but boxing was like my favorite thing just because of that. I could get it out, and I'd take a licking sometimes. I'd get my butt kicked every once in a while, but I'd give some shots out too. So I had a similar experience in that regard. It was good for me.
And I'm glad you went to boxing. I love boxing. Boxing is one of the best sports out there. Unfortunately, it's a dying sport nowadays just because of UFC and, all the parents, we get our kids, young kids want to get into the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, they're doing all the martial arts stuff, but they should be into boxing to teach them patience, to teach them footwork, to teach them discipline. That's the reason why we'll never see another next American heavyweight. I don't think we'll see that just because of the fact I think they're all in the UFC. But boxing is great. Sergey Lykovich, he's a Belarus. He was a heavyweight champion here, WBC. Sergey's a good buddy of mine. Ray Beltran. Yeah, Ray Beltran. And, Sergey was just in about 3 months ago, his son had a busted ankle. So I'm doing rehab on his son now. Ray Beltran, it was here. Benavides, we have all the Benavides kids from Phoenix. And so my buddy Sim, who's in Oregon, he's currently training David right now for David's next fight. So, yeah, I appreciate your boxing, man, and I love I'm all for that. All for that.
Oh, heck yeah, dude. I'm a
Yeah.
huge combat sports
Yeah.
fan, but yeah, I still love boxing. It's just
Yeah.
like you said, the sport is shifting because of
Well,
that. And that's
it's
cool. You have
skill.
all those connections. So
Yeah, it's skill. Boxing's more skill. UFC is different. I know. Don't make me wrong. If there's UFC people out there, it's just it's a brutal sport. It is a brutal sport. Anybody can win it any given time. We went through with Mark Kerr and those guys were doing it in Van Arsdale. We've had all those guys locally, worked around them all. When James Toney went out there and was fighting, we were going to see who about the heavyweight, boxer versus the UFC. So it's kind of cool how that all goes together, But I like boxing still, man, because, my whole thing is you got to play chess, not checkers, and everything's a calculated move. And I think that's more boxing than what UFC is. At UFC, you're looking for somebody else to slip up and then you can take advantage.
no, 100%, man. Oh, dude, I love that you have the respect for it too. That a lot of people just don't have that. They don't understand what actually goes into boxing.
Boxing is tough. They say boxing is the only sport you don't play. If you play boxing, you play boxing, you get hurt. Every other sport you play. Yep.
So Chad, as you in your story, this is what I kind of want to highlight as well. So one of the things I talk about with a lot of the athletes that I coach and whatnot is, when you get injured, you have this, there's a resilience that you have to kind of build, and you have to get through this like mental grind. And what happens with a lot of the athletes that I've had on the show, as well as the ones that I coach, is they'll say the same thing to me. They'll be like, "Hey coach, it feels like all that I've ever worked for is wiped away when I go through an injury." Like those who have torn their ACL or they've shredded their shoulder like I did. And you worked so hard, you got in good peak physical condition, you got yourself in such good condition, you're playing well, and all of a sudden that injury happens and you go back to ground zero. Like it's like you've lost all your gains from a physical standpoint. You don't even know if you can get back to the full speed that you were at before. The mental side of it's tough. The recovery process from an injury is so hard that the general public doesn't see what's going on behind the scenes mentally and emotionally for an athlete. So starting at ground zero is tough. And so when the people reached out to me regarding this podcast, one of the things they mentioned was how like you have some experience having to start again and get moving in life specifically. And one of those things was spending time behind bars. And I want to ask your story. That's a big piece of your story. How did that work in your life so that I can share this with the athletes of just like, how do you start mentally getting back from ground zero and getting yourself back on track?
Yeah, well, when it's all a vision. So when you have an ACL injury and you're a starter, you're out there playing and whatnot, I always tell my kids, you've never seen the field or the game from the sideline. So you're going to become much more valuable. You're going to become a stronger player when you return just from seeing the game at a different angle. You have to change your perspective of it all. You have to change your perception. I've got a lot of burn people that come in. I've got burn survivors that are working next to my athletes who have all been beat up. So I have everything. We feed off each other. Everything feeds off each other, but it's around being optimistic. I can make this comeback. I can make it happen. High school friends I was involved with, always the good kids. I'm working, I'm doing different things, but I do have some good high school friends I was around. And in 2003, 2005, I was sentenced to 30 months in a federal prison. I was still doing my training. I was still working, doing everything I had to do. It was just one of the things I got caught up. My crime was committed in Hawaii. So I flew money back from Hawaii back to Arizona 3 months later. And I had no problem with that. 3 months later, I've got the feds, the DEA, the Phoenix police officers, everybody banging on my door. Oh, shit. Now, this time of my life, I was at a crossroad. Now, mind you, I started partying with all these athletes, which, again, inner city kids. I don't care if you're white, black, Mexican, Russian, Asian, whatever. There was a group that we all get sucked into. They're savages. And I see the kids. As coaches, we're trying to keep people out of that environment. We're trying to give them a better life. Very rarely do we ever think that a coach is going to fall back into that environment.
Right.
But I was one of those coaches that fell into that environment. I didn't know who I was at that time. I knew what I wanted to do. As I mentioned, I knew I wanted to do sports performance. I knew I wanted to do training, and I knew I wanted to help people. But when the entertainment came around, when everything was going out, partying was coming around, and I got caught up. I get caught up. I was selling drugs. I started using drugs at the tail end of it all. I was down in South Phoenix, running the streets and doing everything. but I never was the victim. I never was the victim. I never had any sympathy. This was all pure me entertainment purposes. And just, again, I'm an extreme athlete. I'm full of adrenaline. I love challenges, and the better the chase, the better the thrill. We always ask a question, which I mentioned before to a couple other people, is we ask our athletes now, we ask them one question: why are you an athlete? Right? And everyone says, well, because I get to compete. Well, can't you compete in life? Well, because I like to win. Well, can't you win in life? You don't have to be an athlete to do those things. And that really hit me, where mine was the thrill of adrenaline. I was an athlete because I loved adrenaline. Unfortunately, when I stopped playing sports, I looked for it otherwhere, and I looked for it in the streets. I still found the adrenaline. Unfortunately, it caught me with a federal case for money laundering. I was sentenced to 30 months in prison. I met my current wife at that time. She was my savior when I met her. She was a bartender. I went with my buddy. I'm not supposed to be drinking, but when you're looking at a lot of time and you don't know your life is in a limbo, what do? So, I was waiting, went to the bar. I met this lady. Her name is Jackie. And I said, from the first day, I said, I'm going to marry you. And she said, get in line. So I got in line for 8 months. I asked her out on a date for 8 months. Nothing ever happened. She did not want me to go on a date with her or whatever. I just kept on getting turned down. But persistence, kind of like the injury. I'm going to keep coming back. I'm going to keep coming back. I'm going to keep coming back. Finally, after 8 months, I got a date with her, right? To turn that into it all, she was my why. She was my why. I finally found a reason. It wasn't just partying. It wasn't going out just doing all the fun. I found out that I knew that I'm here to help people. And she was a single mother of 3 kids, right? So with her, that was who I needed to be. That's who I needed to change. I got sentenced to 30 months in prison, went to prison. When everything's taken away from you, you have to start from the bottom, just like an injury. Step 1. Eddie, my paralyzed guy, my art guy, he's an old AAU coach, been to the Peach Jam like 16 times, Arizona Stars, sponsored by Nike. George Raveling was one of his good guys. George has passed away here last month. So Art was one of the guys. He said, in order to be a good shooter, you got to start with 1 in a row. And then you got to make 1 in a row after that until you make 10 in a row. So that's how I got my life. And that's one of the theories and principles I use in my life, is when I got out of prison, it was 1 in a row, one good day after the other. I truly am one of those guys that have never had a bad day. I've had a bad moment in my day, but I've never had a bad day. I don't let it ruin me. I'm very optimistic, because when you have been in situations that I've been in, living on the streets, drug dealing and other things, it puts perspective in anything. Life now is so easy. These recoveries are so easy to do when you trust yourself and you know who you really are. You got to take a lot of self-reflection. And that's what I do with my athletes that are coming back from injuries. I have them take a big look at themselves right now. Either this is going to make you a better player, or this is going to fold you like a chair, and you're going to be done.
Man, that's crazy, man. And
Yes.
yeah, I mean, isn't it interesting? Like, all it takes is getting caught up in the wrong. Life might be going okay for you, but if you get caught up in the wrong things a little bit, it's not long before you kind of find yourself in a washing machine where you're just kind of engulfed in it. And that's why, like, I think a lot of people will say, like, well, how did that happen to him or her? Well, it could happen to anybody if you're not careful of, like, who you're getting around and what you're doing. All of a sudden, one big mistake can just take you out. But I like what you said there, like, especially the 1 in a row. That's a great concept.
1 in a row.
And Chad, when you were in prison, I've talked to a couple. Here's a fun fact about me, which is random, but this is why I was so intrigued by that when I got the email. Was I actually found myself about 10 years ago going down this rabbit hole on YouTube, and I became infatuated with listening to prison stories. And I know this is such a weird, random fact, completely separate from this podcast. The reason I loved it, though, was because I got to hear people who had spent time in prison, and I learned about, from the insider's perspective, what prisons were like in California versus Virginia versus Idaho versus Texas versus and just here in Florida, and hearing people's stories and just like learning the things. And it became fascinating for me. But one of the things I really loved, Chad, was hearing their like mentality, like how did they get through it all day when they're facing a certain sentence, like getting the anxiety of, like, you have a date when you're going to get out. What are you going to do when you get out, though? Is everything gone? And I have a friend of mine who I grew up with who, spent time in prison through his whole 20s, over 10 years for a drug charge. And, and the thing is like, yeah, you get out and it's all of a sudden starting from ground zero. I would just love to just dive into your mentality while you were in prison.
Yep.
Like, did you have a routine, or did you read books? Did you have a workout routine? What did you do to get through?
Yes. the first day, the hardest, and everything all goes with fear and everything goes with stress, right? Those are two words. I do not fear anything except for snakes, and I don't stress. Obviously, life in the hood and everything that we've done, getting chased, shot at, whatever. That was fearful, but those are moments of survival. You don't have time to be fearful for that. You know, you don't fear getting caught. I didn't fear walking through the airport with money, because if so, then I probably would have stood out like a sore thumb, and the next thing you know, they would have probably pulled me over. So fear is nothing that I really have. Wrestling, when I was wrestling, I got the herpes glanitorium, so I learned how to control stress real bad, so I don't have herpes come back on my face. Plus, I tell people stressing is when your fiance or your girlfriend, when at that point she was my girlfriend, when she drops me off to self-surrender at the Marshall's building for 30 months, and I say I love you and I hope that I get to see you again. That was stressful, right? That was stressful. And then I'm walking into the doors of the land unknown when you go behind there. When I first got arrested, I traveled from Arizona. They put me on a Con Air plane. I flew to Oklahoma City because there was a federal crime. So I got into the Federal Transfer Center. The plane touched down on the tarmac. We didn't get off the plane and touch ground. We walked right into the federal jail from the air ramp that they put up to the plane. So, these experiences were like, damn, I've seen this shit in the movie before, but I never thought I'd actually ever experience it, right? So I get there. I was in Oklahoma City for a couple of weeks or so, and then on my way back to Hawaii, they stopped me. I flew and I landed in San Bernardino County. I spent time at San Bernardino County, Riverside, in their state system, as I was a federal inmate getting held to go over there. So I was moved across the country. Finally, I landed in Hawaii. I got bailed out for $25,000. Came back to Arizona, fought my case on the outside, got sentenced to 30 months. Going in prison, again, it's like walking into college the first day, right? I tell all these kids when they go to college, it's going to be nerve-wracking. You're not going to know anybody. You're going to have to pick the right crew, and you're going to have to analyze your surroundings. You're going to have to look into your situations. So I got there first thing in prison. First day, the next day I woke up, I had somebody knocking at my bunk, and he's like, "Dunn, get up." And it was a worker. Right? It was a worker that worked there. He says, "You're coming with me. You're on the construction crew." So from day one, I started working, right? Just to occupy my time. Again, I've always been a hard worker, even through all my drug habits, my days and everything else. I was the best drug dealer because I was available 24/7. Right? I was the best drug user because I was awake 24/7. I'll do whatever needs to be done. Hard work was part of my genes, right? So I grew up being a hard worker. So when I got to prison, it was going to be the same thing, right? I'm going to pass my time by working. I'm going to do everything I can do. The victim mentality is taken over and is carried over into prison. There's a lot of guys that sit there that have the victim mentality, and they just waste away. They count days, they count hours, they do all that. I knew for me to keep my mind mentally sharp and to do what I needed to do, I had to stay active. So I started working. Within 2 weeks, I met these two guys that were part of the crew that was out there that have been there for a little while. And they're like, "Hey, come over here. We want to talk to you." One of the guys is my best friend to this day, Robbie Kessling. He just got done. He served 19 and a half years in prison. He got out like 5 years ago. Same thing. It was a drug case out of Washington. High, big magnitude of everything else. But he was played football at Wyoming, UFC wrestler, world champion jiu-jitsu guy. 6'5", 285 pounds, chiseled with like 4% body fat, right? First, I'm glad I met him because he was on my side in case shit went down. That was the best thing, But again, at the same time, he was one of the guys that said, "Hey, I'm going to get you enrolled in school. You're going to take classes here. We're going to make the best of our time, and we're going to help you out, and you're going to help me out." So we became good friends. We were very fortunate in the federal system to have basketball courts, softball teams, softball leagues. We had a weight pile. So I was able to do basically my normal lifestyle that I normally would be doing besides drugs. I was able to do it inside prison, and at that point in time, it's like, this is really who you are. This is who you really are. You're a hard worker. You're somebody that believes in health. You're somebody that believes in helping everybody else. And so I did everything that I could do to help out everybody, and including myself during my time in prison. Never was the victim. Like I said, I used my time occupied and use it wisely. Kind of like training. I didn't come in here and waste a rep, right? Never wasted a rep. I went in there to do from day one was that when I got out, I was going to be a better person.
Man, that's awesome. Easier said than done, however.
Yes.
But you did it. And I think that's really cool to hear how you got through that, because I can't even imagine, dude, like just the idea of it. It stresses me out. But I think that's why there's a lot of people like yourself that become, well, if you utilize the tools that you're equipped with while you're in there, you can make something out of it. So obviously that, along with your schooling, along with just all the drive, the grit, determination, that's gotten you to the point now where obviously, like we said it earlier, CEO and co-founder of Move Human Performance Center in Arizona, Now I want to talk about that. So like you've
Yep.
gotten through the adversity of your life. You're getting through that. You've got schooling done. You're driving towards what you want to do. How did you get this all started over at Move?
Right. So, first day out of prison, I went back to work with my buddies I used to work with before I got. So it was Rehab Plus, like I said, I owe those guys everything. We had back in the day when I first started with them, we had Donovan McNabb and Eddie George, Barry Sanders. We did all the combine stuff coming in. Peter Warwick, Ron Dugans, Chad Owens. So we've had a bunch of the athletes over the time, bunch of pole vaulters, Stacy Dragila, Olympic pole vaulter. So we had them. So I was, and again, that was just, there was two identities that I was playing at that time, But now knowing who I was, when I went back to work from day one, I jumped back in. I started doing everything that I needed to do with new intentions. And that was to become a better person. So treating the patients, treating the clients, training, being with Warren and everybody over there, I fit right back in and I started going. The full circle comes back around about 2 years in 2005. I want to say it was 2007, 2009. I seen Eddie King falls in Mammoth or Big Bear, Arizona, California, breaks his back, broke T11, T12, spinal cord fracture, and he's paralyzed. So this came across my Facebook feed, and his whole Cambridge medical. And so just out on the whim, I reached out to him. I left him a message and said, hey, Eddie, Chad Dunn here in Phoenix. I do physical therapy, sports performance stuff. I saw you went down, broke your back. If you ever do get a chance to come to Phoenix, I'd love to work with you. I'd love to see what's going down. Sure enough, about 3 weeks later, I get a message. Hey, Chad, Eddie, I'm moving to Arizona. I'd like to connect with you.
Wow.
So I was like, man, this is going to be great. This is going to be awesome. He came willing in through the front door. He went to Project Walk and Next Step. That was in Redondo in San Diego. So he did have a little bit of pre-therapy that was over there, but he was still wheelchair bound. All I knew was one thing. I got out of prison and I was helping myself. I knew I could help him. How? We're going to figure that out, just like I had to do with me. It's going to be one in a row, one in a row, one in a row. So we got him standing. We got him up on a walker. He had massive quads still, so I knew I had something that I could work with. Just kind of like with me. I get out of prison. I knew I had will. As long as I had will and I had optimism, I knew I could work with that. Eddie came in and said, hey, buddy, I'm self-taught. I'm a 1970s guy. I learned everything through BMX and football by teaching myself. That's what we used to do back in the day. We didn't have specialized trainers. We didn't have sports performance trainers, yoga coaches, tie your shoe coaches like they do nowadays. Right? Yeah. We only had to do, you had to go figure this shit out. Either you were good or you sucked. That was the whole thing. So working with Eddie, he says, I'll tell you one thing, Chad, I've never worked with a spinal cord patient before. I worked with athletes and ACLs and ankles and shoulders and labrums and everything else. But I've never had to worry about a spinal cord injury. So Eddie said, I became very well self-taught during this whole process. I don't use the TV because in prison, the biggest fights started over the TV. So I don't watch TV. Even at home, the husbands and wives fighting over what they're going to watch and the channel will give me the controller. I don't even do it. I don't even get in that route because the TV for me is a waste of time. It was a waste of time. I saw people in prison, waste of time. So when I sat down, I sit down now, even to this day, I sit down and I do research every night, self-taught, and that's one of the good things with the society that we have nowadays as coaches is that there's so many different platforms that you can learn on. There's so much information that's readily available for you. Don't spend your time surfing TikTok and Instagram and looking at your scrolls and your feeds. If you're going to be on something, why don't you do that to better yourself? Which that's what I did with Eddie. And next thing you know, 354 days after his accident, we got him back on the bike and he was riding. 365 days he was walking again. So kind of cool. That was the start of it all. I had Eddie. Had an intern girl. She worked at the burn unit down in Phoenix at our burn unit. She was doing her internship and I was working with Eddie. So I was kind of more the mental guy now. Like, hey, this is the guy's going to help keep you going. Chad's going to help keep you going. Nobody knew my story about me being in prison, right? Nobody knew. Until recently here, about 4 or 5 years ago, I had a podcast that I did where I let my whole story come out because, again, as a new business owner, training kids and training people, the stigma of, hey, this is who he is. He's a criminal or whatever. Really, I'm a great guy. I'm a good guy. I want to give back to people, give back to the families. And so I didn't want that to hurt nothing. I worked with Eddie. I had my burn guy who was on fire for about 2.5 minutes. He got about 70% burn of his body. I had him going. And then I had another guy that was a gunshot. He was helping save a Phoenix police officer. And he got shot point blank by the suspects who stole the cop's gun, shot the police officer, and shot my boy Phil. So I called him my three stooges or my three amigos, right? I had 3 tough cases that were going down. And as I'm doing these cases, I knew I had something else to give. I knew I had something else to give. And at Rehab Plus, I was kind of at the ceiling, and I was working for somebody, and I didn't feel like I could show what I really was worth. And I didn't think I could show what I really had and what I was willing to do. So I talked to a couple of guys. I had a client that was executive with PetSmart. And then, of course, my wife now, they were kind of my back end. They said, bro, you need to do your own thing. And I'm like, yeah, but it's hard. I don't have the money. Because again, starting over, you don't have the money, right? So resources are short. I did go try to find another job at Dynasplit, which is a medical device company. I tried to do that before I opened up Move. I got turned down because I have a felony. I passed every application, every interview process. But when it got to the last one, convicted felon, see you, bye-bye, no more options. So my fate of my future was also determined by me, right? Either you can sit here and get denied, you can work for somebody and stay where you're at, or you can jump off the cliff, which I'm used to doing, and you can make it for yourself. And I've survived the worst things. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to try this. So we got a business plan together for Move. I went down to the bank. And again, you're a convicted felon. We can't give you a loan. Right? So now I'm scrambling. I talked to an angel investor. It was a good thing. But again, I could tell a shark from a mile away because I was one of those guys, right? So the percentages, the interest rates and everything else, I'm like, nah, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this or even want to do that. Last ditch effort, I went back to my family. My pop says, you know what, we believe in you and everything else, man. We'll give you the money to get your Move started up and, be willing to lose everything. Because, again, my family, they had a business they lost in the early 80s. So my dad's very, very conservative. Not me. I'm not conservative at all. I promise you, man, I'm going to figure this out. So it was a tough sell for him because he didn't want me losing everything. But I'm like, Pops, I've already lost everything once and I'm going to get it all back again. So, again, I'll be able to build, promise you. And that was in 2017 when we opened up Move. And here we are 9 years later.
Wow, man. That's quite the story. I was taking notes here. Mentioned Eddie. That's actually really cool that you had the opportunity to take care of him, that he trusted you. I wanted to ask this question with someone like him and then the other two as well.
Sure.
Those are some pretty big deals, a burn and a gunshot. And then obviously a back break, you're breaking your spine, spinal cord injury, whatever. What was something that you noticed about all three of them, like in regards to their recovery while you were working with them? Obviously, they trusted you. They put their trust in you to, hey, I'm going to trust him that he's going to figure it out. But what did you notice in all of them, if you could go back in time and see, like, what was the mentality that they had of, like, coming in there and allowing you to kind of work with them?
But speaking with Eddie, which is speaking with any other athlete that we train right now or anybody that you train, are you ready to work? I had a girl come in this weekend, right? A new girl. She was her first day in here. And so I was just finishing up one of my classes and I looked over to her and I said, hey, are you a hard worker? And her response was, sometimes. Don't ever tell a coach you're a hard worker sometimes because you're going to play sometimes, right? If ever, right? So that's the mindset of some of these kids nowadays, like I wouldn't even think about saying that. That's something sometimes wouldn't even come out of my mouth, But when I saw Eddie, when Eddie was paralyzed, and he asked the doctors, he said, what's my prognosis? They said, sir, you got a spinal cord injury. He said, so am I going to be able to walk? And they say, well, we don't know. Spinal cord is the only injury that they cannot cure to this day. And Eddie looked at the doctor. He says, well, you don't know who you're working with, right? And he told me that on the back of his shirt, it said, believe. I knew he was going to be fine because I could see the optimism in him and I could see everything else. Anthony, my burn guy, I knew he would be fine because he's young. He's got a young family. But I saw fear in him. Obviously, being on fire for 2.5 minutes and having this happen, there's a lot of fear. But I had to turn that fear into focus, right? You take fear and you focus it on what you're going to do to overcome something, which is what I would do with I'm afraid of coming back. My first game off of an ACL, or I've got a UCL injury and I've got a gymnast that's got to go back and start tumbling. Take that fear and turn it into focus. The more you focus, the better you're going to be. So Anthony gave me the demonstration of fear to focus. Phil was a Vietnam guy. He didn't listen for nothing. Matter of fact, he had a 30-pound restriction on him. And so I was only up to letting him lift it. When he first came in, I had the old hammer strength machines where you can put the weight on the backside and you could offload it. He was lifting like -5 pounds, right? And then as we started going, he started lifting a little bit more. Next thing you know, he was over the 30 pounds. So I had him on the row machine and I put 30 on there. And he's like, Chad, this is too light. I've got to continue to get better. This is not going to do anything for me. I said, Phil, this is what the doctor said. You have a 30-pound restrictions. This is all I can do. He says, that's 30 pounds in each hand, right? So he says, put the thing to 60. So again, I put it to 60. And to this day, if I ever would have put limitations on Phil, he would not have made the comeback. So Phil, avoid limitations. Anthony, if you have anything, or anybody listening, if you have fear, turn that into focus. And then with Eddie, you got to come in and you got to believe, right? And those are the same things I took myself to help me with my recovery. Little did those three know, as I was helping them all recover, they were helping me recover, right? We were all being rehabilitated. I was just in a different way. It wasn't an injury. It was more of a personal thing.
Man, that's so cool. And what a cool impact they've had on you, because it's obviously impacted you, influenced you as well as you continue on with that work with other athletes and individuals with what you're doing at Move. That's awesome, man. Talk to us about like some of the services you guys provide at Move in Arizona.
Yeah, so at Move, we're still private, right? So we compete with all the corporate places. I've got Exos, my buddy Mark Verstegen, or Mark Verstegen, who was at API. Warren, my guy I worked with, kind of pioneer. They've now sold out to Banner. They've all sold. So everyone's going corporate in the physical therapy world. Me, when I opened up Move, I saw Uber and I saw Lyft, okay? They're not discount cabs. They're not taxi cabs, but they're going to get you from point A to point B efficient. And I promise you'll get there. And it's probably going to be a little bit cheaper. So I'm not a physical therapist. I don't have a license. I've got 30 years of experience. I've got all of my certifications from the NASM. I've got my sports performance, my behavioral change specialist. I have all my certifications. And so when I opened up Move, I thought, you know what? I'm going to be the Uber to physical therapy, because nobody likes to go to therapy now because insurances don't pay. The therapy's gotten shitty. They're not doing modalities no more. They're just doing a little bit of soft tissue and giving you a home exercise program and say, go do this. So I told people, if you want to come into me, I will help get you better. I've got 3 paralyzed people walking out of 6. I've got burned people that have made remarkable comebacks. I am not a therapist, but I am the Uber, and I will get you to your final destination. So I opened that up, and I became very busy treating injuries, right? Mind you, I love training. I got so busy treating injuries that I couldn't train. My wife, Jackie, who's a bartender for her whole life, she's in the customer service industry, works out, and she does fitness. So she stayed with me to help do some administrative stuff when we were getting Move up and opening. But now she became a trainer, right? She was training the people, and she knows, because she's been around me. She knows forms. She knows exercises. I was helping her with the prescription of them all. And she's a no sticker. She's an Italian. She's tough. You're not going to tell her no, right? So again, the best type of trainer to have is somebody that's a little bit forceful. So she started training people. I'm busy. And, we're jamming, but at the same time, it's not going to make enough money, because, again, we have 2 incomes coming into one place. And so I have a physical therapist that I used to do intern with. I put an ad out there that we're looking for a therapist. As a non-provider owner, you can't bill therapy, right? So I could only take cash. So I brought Crystal on board, and she was now our licensed physical therapist. We were able to take insurances. So now we had a cash price. We had an insurance base, and we had trading. So we had some services that were starting to build on everything, and we're starting to legitimize it now through an actual physical therapy company. Currently, I have 2 physical therapists. I have a physical therapist assistant that we have. I've got my right-hand man, Kane, that works with me. We have a front desk guy, and we have my wife. So we have 8 employees that now work with us, and we started from 0.
Man, that's actually really inspiring too. Just like you took a non-traditional approach to this industry and you utilized your skill sets and your knowledge. You were transparent about that, and then you kind of you built on top of that. And now you got it. That's actually quite incredible.
Everyone says, how are you going to have a physical therapy clinic when you're not a physical therapist? I said, it's perfect. I'm going to hire one.
I love it, dude. That's exactly that's the mindset. Yeah, it is easy.
Yes, like, dude, but people don't want to do that because that's not the norm, right? That's not the norm.
Dude, I love that. Well, I'm sure you can't specifically mention names, but what would you? But I would like to ask you, like the people that do come to you currently, like current clients and so forth. What would be the most common? I guess you've got paralyzed people that have come through there, and then walking. You mentioned that, but as far as like, I guess the average Joe, are we talking about just like post-surgery type of deal? Is it just injury?
Most of us most of us are out. They're all outpatient surgeries. We see probably 15 ACLs, 20 ACLs a day. We've up to date. We've got Dignity Health out here. Dr. Heaps is a great doctor that's been on board with us, and then my buddies over at Mayo. So I got Dr. Shabra. They're good research, and of course Mayo being Mayo. As the whole circles come around, I had a kid that was at Brophy High School out here, basketball player. Went to Michigan, played at ASU, and finished his last stint at the University of Pacific, Hawaii. He went to med school. He got number 1 on his MCAT test, and he came out here to do his fellowship or his residency with Mayo. And so when I talk to Sai, I'm like, Sai, if you need anything from us, or if you have any of the latest and greatest techniques or whatever's going on, again, I'm a self-learner. So I always go, and I've got great connections from over the years of experience. So I talk to the doctors themselves. Mayo gave us it's an AI program that they're having right now. It's in beta testing. So you can do a video with your phone, and then it's all AI, and it shows you markers on knee valgus and vargus and collapsing. So it can show you like a percentage or an increase of rate of injury. So we've done a lot of these cool programs, and we've done a lot of different things with it all. Putting this together, we've developed a team. ACLs, we have a protocol that we do that's just unbelievable. We have great results. What I'm seeing more in the trend is double ACLs. I see a huge trend of it right now. And, I think a lot of it goes back into the kids and the athletes themselves. I used to get people to run at 12 weeks. That was kind of my guideline, and that was kind of the goal line that we did. Right now, I don't get them to run till 16 weeks. I prolonged that for 4 more weeks because they're not diligent enough to do the beginning stages of the rehab, and they don't understand what it's like to have that foundation.
See that?
Yeah, it is. They want to hurry up and get through. They want to go and start the strength stuff before they got their legs straight, and it's just very hard for me to do that. So I've taken that and I've modified a lot of what I used to do, which again, this is, you got to work with people. Everyone that comes to our door is treated individually. We don't have cookie cutter protocols. We have all the force plates. We have the valve testings. We do all the dynamo testings. So everything's now got quantitative data. So we know where you're at. And if you don't hit these markers, unfortunately, you're not moving on, And I think that's kind of with life too, right? If you don't hit these certain things, we should allow you to progress forward. But unfortunately, we do. And now we get caught up with somebody that's at whatever level and they really don't know what they want to do. You get lost.
For sure. No, this is so insightful, man. I really appreciate this. So question for you. I had 2 questions before we wrap up. So just make sure I have one that I noted it down here that I want to circle back on. But if I'm in Arizona or not, but I just want to take advantage of your guys' services, I'm like, okay, I heard this podcast or I saw this video clip on social media somewhere and I started researching your stuff. How does one get a hold of you, Chad? Is it just simply go to the website, call you guys and set it up? Like how does one take advantage of your guys' services?
Yeah. Obviously, obviously our website, we have our website. We have all the social media. moveperformance.com is our website. Move Performance on Twitter, on Instagram, or X, I guess I should say, on Instagram. Mind Over Virtual Everything. I do have a book coming out next month, and so that's going to be another one. I've got Mind Over Virtual Everything, and then again, Chad Dunn 22. That's my Instagram. That's my Twitter. So all the social media channels with Move Performance. Obviously, the websites as well. So we're open. I've got guys that come in from China. I've got a basketball kid that comes in for China once a year and comes and train with me, and I've got 2 kids that come in from England. So we are worldwide. We do have people that come around and do around. So it's kind of a cool thing already that we've established.
Oh, that's a really cool thing that you've established, man. That's not just kind of, that's freaking awesome. The book, when that becomes available, I'd like to update the description of the podcast when that becomes available. But can you tell us, like, do you know where it's going to be available? Is it Amazon? Where?
The book. Yep, the book's going to be out next month, October 28th. Right, it'll be released on Amazon, so you'll be able to buy it paperback, hardback. There'll be an ebook version of it all. Basically, as I go through, and it is tied in with sports. This all goes back to being a coach. It's better to be a life coach. And I also take this into relationships as well, because again, as we're quick to transfer teams right now, we're quick to get divorced and leave our husbands, wives, or whatever. So this whole book is about toughening it out, knowing who you are, finding your own self-identity and your own reflection. It's out October 28th, hardback, Amazon. I'm hoping to get it into the bookstores, Barnes and Nobles, and everything else. And then I want to take this and I want to be on stage. I want to be able to, everybody wants to be a social media influencer. I want to be an inspirer. I want to be an inspiration. I'm not here to influence you, right? I'm only here to inspire you.
I dig it, man. I absolutely dig it. One question I had here too, earlier in the podcast, you mentioned that you like to spend time studying and like trying to grow and whatnot. I want to ask you this because that's one of the things that I think we all as humans, athletes, non-athletes, whatever, but as humans, like we get to a certain point in our career, we're like, oh, we made it. Or we get a certain point in our athletic career, oh, we made it. And like the progression almost stops once you land that job or once you get that position, you become the starter. And in reality, it should be the opposite. You should continuously be educating yourself. And so I'm curious, like at this point in your career, you have a successful business, you've overcome adversity, you're writing a book. What are some of the things you're doing, like specifically when you say you go home and research and you do study? Like, what's a book or a resource that you've used recently in your life, Chad, that's helped you?
Yeah, well, obviously we do a lot of the media stuff, and so as I try to keep my hands, and again, I want to be well versed in my business, and I want to be well versed in what it is that I'm around. So I've been reading a bunch on how to do videography. I've been doing a whole bunch now on like texting, so that or not texting on photographic, so graphic designing. So I've been learning a lot on the graphic designing stuff. Any of the researches that come out. Brandon, our therapist, we discuss things back and forth with protocols or anything that are coming. So I always have, there's always sports journals, the Bone and Joint Journal. I'm always reading something such as, so again, when you talked about we made it, no one's ever made it. One of my other mentors, he's 91 years old. He used to be the CEO of Honeywell, or a big up in Honeywell. And this guy just grinds. He's 12,000 steps a day, out there working. He's out there learning. He's reading books, at 91 years, man, you already know everything. What else is there to know? But again, having these people around me, it's like, lifelong learner, and I think in my book, I put you're either growing or you're dying. Right. So for me, I'm constantly growing, and I tell these that's the one in the row. As soon as you stop, you're done.
I love it, man. Last question for you, Chad. What is the biggest life lesson you've taken away throughout all of the life experiences, from the BMX racing to the wrestling to spending time in prison to spending time, at school and internships and running your own business, the ups and downs of all that? What is the biggest life lesson or biggest piece of advice, if you could just, wrap that into one thing to tell our listeners today?
Yeah, the biggest piece of advice, and it all goes back into choices, as athletes. If you're looking to get that big NIL deal right now, I've got a kid right now, Bruce Branch. He's number 1 in class of 2027 for basketball. He just left and went to Prolific, Florida, so he can go play over there. I've had Ty Washington, Cody Williams. I was at the NBA draft last year with Cody Williams, who got drafted number 10 overall. So, we're around these people in sports. I'm around these business guys. I got Tim Hovick from Santan Ford, who's a big Ford guy. And just watching and listen to everybody, it all comes back about choices. Nobody's responsible for what you do except for you. And as I was going through my transformation from being an inmate to being a CEO, I have my first book. I've got my tattoos to tell my story of my whole body. And this one over here that I have, I wanted to put Move on me somehow, but I didn't think that the Oakley owner had an Oakley tattoo. And so there's a part in one of the Tupac songs. It says, "My every move is a calculated step." So to me, that means think before you do, right? So my every move is a calculated step. The best piece of advice I give everybody is slow down. You have to make a conscious decision on what it is that you are going to answer or do, and you're probably going to have a good outcome. If you leave it to your subconscious or your unconscious thoughts, you're probably going to get yourself in trouble, or you're probably not going to be able to grow because you're moving on autopilot. Think before you do.
Man, absolute fire, man. I appreciate you, Chad. That was
Yes.
It's been a phenomenal time talking to you. Once again, guys, this is the co-founder and CEO of Move Human Performance Center in Arizona. Chad, I just want to say thank you. I'm looking forward to reading your book. I'm looking forward to following your journey from here on out. You got a fan and a friend in me, so I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
No, I appreciate Tuesday for having me on here.
Absolutely. For all those who are listening, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll be coming to you guys next week with another
like, comment, and subscribe.
There we go, baby. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.